Welcome back, everybody. I'm actually glad that I didn't have to do the opening slot. So Richard, well done for that one, because it's always a difficult one. Everybody just stepped off the trains, still a bit weary-eyed, especially those travelled a little bit further. Thanks to that again, Alvin. But I thought this morning's sessions were actually really, really useful. I mean, Richard's opening to kind of just to show us very, very briefly what cloud computing is actually all about. And then to have a bit of an insight in terms of a real application, software as a service in the cloud, not just a model, but actually something that's working today and has been working for a number of years, I think is very, very useful. It's not just a concept we're talking about here, it's actually something that's happening right now. And I also thought Jack Vinder's presentation was very, very refreshing. I mean, in my role, I've been dealing with customer-side lawyers for many years, and I wish Jack Vinder actually was working at these places to actually have a bit of an open view in terms of what the cloud's all about and what you should expect from your supplier and what you shouldn't expect from them, and to have a bit more of a realistic view, because I think that's absolutely vital, and to have the right people involved from the start, I think is very, very useful. Now, the next 20 minutes or so, I'd just like to cover some aspects around security within the cloud. Now, you'll be pleased to know I'm not a security expert, so please don't ask any too technical questions because I won't be able to answer them. Before I start, I'd just like to sort of ask around the tables by show of hands, who of you actually have got a more positive approach towards the cloud? We actually think there is some opportunity for us out there by moving things into the cloud. And how many of you are actually positive about the security aspect in the cloud, or how many of you actually have got reservations? So positive towards security in the cloud? Fewer? Reservations? Probably still the majority. So that's obviously an important aspect to consider. First of all, I'd just like to have a look at the background of cloud security out at the moment, and it's always useful to have a look at some of the big guys out there from a research point of view, Forrester this time rather than Gartner, to see what these guys are actually thinking about security in the cloud. And as you can see, they actually see that security is an ever-growing aspect within the cloud, something that was previously slightly ignored, but it has got more and more importance within the decision-making process when you actually move into the cloud. And it's not just about software as a service, it's actually making sure that the end-to-end delivery of any sort of cloud services is as secure as possible. And that the security providers and security market itself has got to adopt their business model towards the cloud. And going forward, their view is that rather than being an inhibitor of cloud services, actually an enabler of cloud services. But actually having the tick in the box, yes, it is secure, I'm quite happy to move an application or some of my environment into a cloud-based environment. Now, there's always a discussion about public versus private cloud, what's a hybrid cloud. If you look at the current large-scale public cloud model, such as Google or some aspects of Amazon, you have got pretty much no control in terms of where your data is, how it gets backed up, how you can recover it, what are my SLAs. In return, you get a very, very cost-effective offering. So you've got to evaluate kind of what is more important for me. And of course, the aspect here we see, like, some data can get lost, and you've got absolutely no grounds to recover that kind of data. So you want to think carefully about what kind of data am I happy to move into the cloud. We look at this of a private cloud offering or a hybrid cloud where you know where the data is residing, where you know where the SLA is, where you know how data is protected, albeit in a multi-tenancy environment, you've got a lot more control. Of course, then you've got the complete private model where you might move things into a cloud-based environment, but it's still locked down. They are your servers, they're your storage, everything is hosted centrally, but you actually own everything. Of course, then you don't necessarily achieve the economies of scale and the cheaper cost that you might want to achieve. Now, last year we all were confronted with a massive story in terms of WikiLeaks, all the data that's been published there. And I think that actually represents, in the first instance, the biggest security risk we all face, that is internal. How did that data actually get to WikiLeaks? Because somebody internally in the US had access to the data and they published that data elsewhere. That risk is still the biggest risk. It's people leaving their laptops on trains. Somebody leaving the organization, but before they leave, taking a nice copy of the database that lists all the customers and all the contact details. out of CRM, for example, and then take it to the competitor. Yeah? Those are the risks we still face today, and they don't move away if you move into the cloud or if you do it on-site. Well, that is the biggest risk we all have. It's not about where does the data actually sit, who manages the infrastructure. It's about our own end users. Yeah? So that's still something we need to consider wherever the data sits. But of course, some of the aspects that were raised by the WikiLeaks aspect was that all those who were against Amazon and other providers who suddenly withdrawn their support for WikiLeaks and tried, with denial of service attacks, tried to break down their websites. Yes, there is a risk within the cloud. But how often does that happen? And it could happen if it sits on your own site as well. If you host all those applications on your own site, you could have the same denial of service attack. Yeah? So just by having the things in the cloud doesn't mean they're actually less secure. Yeah? Another important sort of comparison, I think, is if you look at our existing network technology, most networks these days are delivered across MPLS. 10 years ago, most network specialists would have said, ooh, let's not go there, that is insecure. You know, we're actually sharing our network across the country with hundreds, if not thousands, of different end users and customers. That's insecure, let's not go there. Well, now, we've accepted that, and actually that is secure. We're happy with it. Yeah? It's a perception rather than actual technology security. And cloud services are exactly the same. Cloud infrastructure is using the same kind of principles as MPLS network technology. Yeah? Things are still segregated between different users, between different organizations. So therefore, there is no ability to see somebody else's data, to have access to somebody else's applications. Yeah? Of course, you need to make sure that those services are provided in the appropriate fashion, as Jagvinder mentioned earlier, as part of your due diligence. We would actually actively encourage you to speak to your service provider and actually visit them and see how do they actually do things. So the things we really should consider when assessing cloud security is, first and foremost, who is your actual service provider? Yeah? What kind of security safeguards do they put in place? How do they protect any kind of data that resides within their environment? What options do they give you? What kind of availability can they offer you? What kind of SLA can they offer you? And if they should fail to deliver the SLA, what kind of service credits are they prepared to put into the ring? And how can you guarantee business continuity and disaster recovery? We'll cover all these aspects in the following slides. We always actively encourage our customers, be that a new prospect, be that an existing customer who've been with us for a while, and they get new starters, come and visit us, come and see us. And every credible service provider will be happy to show you around the facility because they've invested an awful lot of time and resources in making sure that their environment is good enough to host your environment, to host your data. Yeah? Have a look in terms of who actually manages the environment that your applications are sitting in, who manages the network. And quite often you'll find that certain service providers, you come and visit their sites, the data center actually, there's a co-located rack in somebody else's data center. Their network operating center is a team of 5 people who actually also do installs, also do any kind of out-of-hours work, and they probably only work 9 to 5. Yeah, website looks fantastic, they've got all the services. But when you actually peel back the layers, you find not always as it seems as it should be. Yeah, so it's absolutely important, and Jagvinder mentioned that as part of your due diligence. Make sure you actually understand what sits behind it, who sits behind it. Yeah? Who are actually the owners of the business? Are they just there for the short term, create a lot of turnover, and then move on to the next and sell on? Or are actually people who have been investing in this kind of infrastructure and environment for some time and have got expertise and a good track record on there? Yeah? How are the data centers actually physically secured? Well, actually, one of the discussions we had with Alvin was quite amusing at the time. Alvin was saying, okay, like, you know, the people who are actually guarding the data centers, do they have, are they armed? And we kind of said, well, no, in the UK, you don't tend to be armed unless you're actually, you know, reasonably high on the security list within the police force. But of course, you've got to make sure data centers are secured. And what kind of compliance does your provider actually adhere to? And are they happy to be audited? We did an audit a while ago, which is still amusing me. It was from a government department, which unfortunately I can't name. They sent a third-party organization to visit our data center, to have a look at our network, have a look at security, have a look at all the systems. And the main recommendations they made at the end of it was that there was some shrubbery outside the data center that we should really cut down because somebody could be hiding behind it and actually with telescopes looking into the data center. And I thought, yes, we will look into that. Which for me, of course, meant like, they couldn't find anything on the inside, so they had to find something on the outside. And I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah.
Did you let them into the data center?
Sorry?
Did you actually let them into the data center?
We had to, unfortunately, yes. So if you look at the security... Sorry?
You increased your carbon footprint.
I have actually, that's very true. If you look at the security safeguard that you should all consider, of course, there's the physical security in terms of how can I access my service provider's data center, or better, how can I not access the data center, because you shouldn't be able to just walk in. Is there any CCTV? Is there kind of audited records in terms of who's got access to the data center and who hasn't? How is the network provided within the data center, as well as from a wider network point of view? What kind of security protection can I get, or how much can I actually put in myself? Have a look at things like server and storage security. In terms of, first, we obviously want a resilient model, a failover model, not just on the physical server side, but also on the storage side, which is difficult to implement on-site unless you're prepared to spend a lot of pounds. But also, how is the architecture actually built to ensure that applications are available at all times and are secure at all times? Yeah. And how does the service provider actually secure their multi-tenancy environment? Of course, there are different ways of achieving that, but it's absolutely vital. If you want to achieve the economies of scale, multi-tenancy is, of course, the way forward, but you've got to make sure that all the safeguards have been put in place and to assess those. A tedious subject. I've been involved with it for far too long, like nearly 12 years now, but backup and recovery is still as vital today as it has been 15, 20, or 30 years ago. You still need to protect all your data. Yeah? And of course, you can provide the backup and recovery yourselves from a centralized multi-tenant environment, or you can ask your service provider to do that. How do they back data up? Is it sit in the same data center, which obviously doesn't really give you any real protection if the data center should be lost? Or can it be provided in a second geographically diverse data center? How can you actually recover the data? Is it a tape-based backup? Is it a disk-based backup? Do they offer replication? Can you do DR tests? How quickly can you get data back? All those things are absolutely vital in ensuring that you've got a secure platform that you can recover if you should ever lose some data. Do they offer things like virtual DR servers in a second data center? So you've lost your data in data center 1 because you still can lose data. End user might have deleted some data. You might have lost an application. You want to bring it back up and running. So you've got a backup copy, let's in a second data center. You could bring it back over the wire to the primary data center, or why not actually fire it up in the second DR data center to actually reduce your recovery time. Yeah, of course, that would be an additional option, but these are the kind of things you should consider when choosing a cloud service provider. Now, availability and uptime are absolutely vital, yeah? And of course, by building a resilient environment, you move the risk up the stack. As Richard mentioned earlier, by having a resilient physical infrastructure, resilient network, resilient service, resilient storage, you then just move to the application layer. And yes, of course, you can still lose data in the application layer because end users lose data, they place it somewhere else, a database may become corrupt, but you've already eliminated all the other aspects that you previously may have suffered by having non-resilient servers in your own environment, by having non-clustered servers or non-clustered storage. Yeah? So how much availability can you actually achieve? And what is the SLA that your service provider is prepared to underwrite? If you do things like net documents, where, as Alvin said, you've got several thousand concurrent users, even half an hour, an hour's worth of downtime will be absolutely detrimental to all these end users, so you can't afford that. Yeah? So what SLA can you actually achieve, and how can you verify that SLA? This was our question earlier, how can you actually prove that is the case? Yeah?